Hey everyone, here in Amplify, we are super thankful to have a diverse group of guests with very diverse opinions. Just know that not all of their perspectives align with what we believe at Stories of Anti-Semitism. And with that in mind, enjoy the episode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Amplify with Stories of Anti-Semitism. We're here today with our good friend, Father Theron Walker from Emmaus Anglican in Castle Rock, Colorado. Good to have you with us today.
Very, very glad to be here.
Well, we're excited. We're excited to have an Anglican on our podcast. You're the very first one.
Oh, wow.
Hope you feel blessed and
I do.
encouraged and all that.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, okay, so we got to get to know you a little bit first. So just tell us a little bit of your story. And actually, hold on, before you tell your story, I just feel like our listeners, probably many of them see the collar and they go, is this guy Anglican or Catholic or Orthodox, and what's the difference? So help us understand the Anglican denomination a little bit. What's unique about it? What sets it apart from maybe some of the other collar-wearing denominations?
Well, the first joke is this keeps fleas away.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
And the shortest way of describing Anglicanism is we're Protestants who love old stuff.
I like that.
It's Protestants who love old stuff. And
Very
now
cool.
a longer answer would be that if you visit an Anglican church, it's a liturgical church, so it looks and feels a lot like what you would experience in a Roman Catholic church or in an Orthodox church or even in a synagogue.
Yeah.
However, at the center of everything that happens in our worship is a proclamation that we are saved by God's grace, which we receive through faith in Jesus Christ. That is at the very, very center of who we are and what we do. It was such a dire and important thing in the 1500s that our forebears said we have to break a 1,000-year relationship with the Roman Catholic Church because some things have crept in about basically how we buy forgiveness. And we said that this has to stop. The focal point of what we're about is celebrating that we are saved by the gift of God, and we receive it in faith.
Cool.
And that's what we're about. So I do go by the term priest. We'll often use the term father, as Paul used of himself. I'm a father in the Lord.
What verse is that? I'm a father in the Lord. What verse?
Yeah, when he described himself as a father in the Lord. I can't give you the citation.
That's all right.
Yeah. So I'm married, been married since 1989. That really,
You're volunteering this information. You're dating yourself, and I wasn't asking you to do that. So, but that's wonderful. So married for 50? No. 45 years.
No, 37.
My math is not
It'll
good.
be 37 in May.
37.
1989.
I'm not trying to make you sound older. I'm really sorry. 37 years. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about your journey into the priesthood then. What did that look like? Why did you become a priest?
So the first thing I would say is I grew up in the church.
Okay.
I grew up in the Assemblies of God, a Pentecostal denomination.
Okay.
And I never, ever really in my life, I started attending when I was probably 4 or 5. I never doubted that Christianity was true. I never doubted that Jesus was my Savior. I just didn't want him to be my Lord. And like a lot of church kids, I think, mine was a family church 2 or 3 times a week, prayers at the table, Bibles in the house, that kind of thing. But I just did not want God telling me what to do.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So I could tell you about, I remember when this Christian vacation Bible school, I'm probably 8, 9, and VBS, and this guy comes and he uses magic tricks as a way of illustrating the gospel. Things with like your sins being taken away, and that would have been the first time that I gave my life to Jesus.
The first time.
Okay. I remember being at summer camp and yes, Lord, but still very much wanting to be a Christian, but not wanting to be a Christian. And then shortly before my 17th birthday, in the Assemblies of God, we had this scouting program called Royal Rangers.
Right.
And in Royal Rangers, in order to earn the Gold Medal of Achievement, that's their Eagle Scout, you have to get the Bible Award. So I grew up in Buffalo, New York, so it's just past Thanksgiving. It's cold, it's snowy, a lot of time inside. I just start reading the Bible like crazy for hours every day.
How old again?
I'm 16.
Okay.
So after 2 months of this, December, January, I'm headed into February, I say to my mom, I've tried to follow the Lord before, but I just don't have the strength to do it. And my mom says, she just kind of laughed and said, well, of course you can't. You need God's help to love him. You need the Holy Spirit. You need God within you. So when you go to bed tonight, just ask the Lord to give you his Spirit and give him the strength to be faithful. And I encountered the Holy Spirit in such a powerful, sweet, peaceful, beautiful way that night that everything changed from then.
Okay.
And I'd like to say I never disobeyed the Lord again. I was never strong-willed or stiff-necked, and of course that's not true. But so really the hard thing was, am I really going to be a Christian?
Yeah.
And then shortly after that, I visited Oral Roberts University on one of these college, come check out our college thing. And I was challenged, offer your future to God. So I did. And at that point, I really knew I was supposed to be a pastor.
Okay.
So I
Maybe
went
not
to Oral
necessarily Anglican.
No, I
but
wasn't.
leadership
I was still
in
in
the
the
church.
Assemblies of God. I was,
Okay.
I was still in the Pentecostal world completely. And while I was at Oral Roberts University, I really discovered the Christian tradition and the breadth of the Christian tradition. And I'm just kind of the way I'm wired. I'm a history geek,
Yeah.
and I love old things, and I always have. I don't really thrive in high energy environments. I like some more kind of space. Let me think about that. Give me a little, give me some time. Let me think about it. Maybe I'll agree. Maybe I won't. So coming into a context where I had the liturgy, I had the history, and I came into a particular congregation that was open to and fluent in the life in the Holy Spirit.
Okay.
So it was a church where healing ministry was a part of everything we did. I believed in the gifts of the Spirit. So it was really a wedding of the ancient faith and even how it's practiced with the charismatic flavor.
Okay.
So a metaphor that a lot of us in this kind of way of doing Anglicanism talk about things, we like to say that we had a fireplace, the structure for the fire.
I like that.
So they
It's a good
go
metaphor.
together.
Yeah.
So I would still describe myself as a charismatic Christian practicing in the Anglican tradition.
Very cool. But you knew from a fairly young age that you want, or at least from the beginning of Bible school at ORU, that you wanted to be in the pastorate.
Yes.
Or in church leadership.
Yeah. 17.
Beautiful. Awesome.
Yep.
Okay, so we're relatively new friends. We met just a few months ago when we started a class that you jumped right in with, and we're so glad you did, called Shared Roots. Christians and Jews coming together to learn about the shared roots of the faith. And before that, I didn't know you, but you seem to have a really passionate desire to talk about that history. Where did that come from?
So the first thing I would say is growing up in the home I grew up in, I just want to thank my mom my mom fed me these Christian comic books when I was a kid.
How funny.
That
Okay.
exposed me to Cross and the Switchblade, to Through the Gates of Splendor,
Okay.
and The Hiding Place.
Oh, wow.
So I was exposed to Corrie ten Boom
Right.
when I'm 8, 9 years old. So in our household, Corrie ten Boom was a hero.
Okay.
And so I was raised to have a tender heart towards Jewish people.
Jewish people.
That's how my mom raised us. And when I was at Oral Roberts University, my freshman year of college, I had a good friend who was a Jewish background Christian at
Okay.
Oral Roberts. His American name was Scott. His birth name was Shlomo, Solomon. So
Yeah.
Shlomo. He was leading a team to Israel in the summer of 1986, and he invited me to go on the team. So I spent the summer of 1986 in Israel doing volunteer work with an organization called Bridges for Peace. And we just did a lot of volunteer work in Jerusalem, including I worked for the Jerusalem bomb squad for 2 weeks,
No way.
which was so bizarre.
Did you dismantle a bomb?
I did not dismantle a bomb. We did light construction work.
Okay.
They were building a new clubhouse for the bomb squad, just inside the Zion Gate in Jerusalem. And so I did get tours of, they have sort of a museum of bombs that they dismantled. I enjoyed Sabbath meal with one of the sappers. So I sort of experienced, this is before the Intifada. This is in 1986. This is
Right.
before any walls have been built.
Yeah.
And just bombings are they're just a regular part of life
Wow.
in Israel. To go into any grocery store, if you have a backpack, you got to take your backpack off. It's got to be searched. To go to a concert in a park, you got to go through a metal detector. Everything is searched. So I was just, my awareness was raised about the conflict. And I came home, back to college, back to Oral Roberts, my sophomore year. I changed my major from evangelism to Old Testament. And amazingly, we had a modern Hebrew minor at Oral Roberts. So I started studying modern Hebrew, and I started studying the Tanakh at ORU, and I got the bug, and I did a lot of Holocaust studies. So that's really where that happened. But then I graduated college. My plan was to really do a sort of Hebraic roots of Jesus path, and just the way life went and what God seemed to do was he took me into the priesthood in the Anglican tradition. And I never really got to do much of that kind of stuff again. And it just sort of sat there. And then this past summer, my good friend, Father Phil, said, we're doing this. I got this friend, Jeremy, and we're doing this thing on shared roots. And Theron, you should be here. So that's how I got in.
That's fantastic. And so you were one of the presenters, one of 5 presenters, and did a wonderful job of kind of redigging the history, especially that history where Christianity and Judaism were kind of together. And I could tell that was something you were passionate about, maybe just because you're passionate about history. But let me ask you a question before we get into some deeper waters here. If you ran into a Christian on the street, or maybe even another pastor, why would you tell them that they should care about the shared roots of Christianity and Judaism?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would say, so right now in my church, we follow this thing called a lectionary. It's a planned set of readings, and lectionary, like lecture, right? So this year we're in the Gospel of Matthew. Just got a brand new commentary on Matthew by a wonderful evangelical scholar. And just opening that up, of course, when we read Matthew, we know Jesus says, I didn't come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. It's a passage everybody knows. Right. But what this scholar has really helped me see is there are about 50 times in the Gospel of Matthew where he writes, and this fulfilled, and this fulfilled, and this fulfilled. So any concept that you can understand who Jesus is without understanding the Old Testament, the Tanakh, Hebrew Scriptures, is crazy. I mean, it's just crazy. And when I hear prominent one of the most prominent evangelical teachers in America, who I won't name, say we need to unhitch from the Old Testament.
Right.
I just think, are we doing this really?
Yeah.
Like we can't understand who Jesus is
Right.
without understanding. And how many times I've had people say, well, there's a God of the Old Testament and a God of the New Testament. Like, oh my goodness. No, it is. The whole thing depends on this being the same God.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
and if
One
you
book,
don't
one
get
narrative.
that,
Right.
one book, one narrative, if you don't get that, you don't get anything.
Yeah.
So I would say, first, to a Christian, you cannot understand your faith if you do not read the first 2/3 of that book.
Right.
Right? You're lost. And anyone who's teaching you, you don't need that, is just a false teacher. So I would say that. The other part I would say is, I would say it's twofold. The first is the way St. Paul talks about what he calls Israel according to the flesh. And he talks, he never uses the words that the church has replaced Israel.
Right.
He says we've been grafted on to Israel.
Yeah.
Well, if we've been grafted on, it seems like a good idea to me that we ought to understand what we've been grafted on
Right.
to.
Yeah.
And then with that, I think there's a sense of a debt of gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
There should be, that these are our forebearers
Yep.
in the faith, and there should be a debt of gratitude.
Yeah.
I would also say that Christian history just has way too many examples of Christians behaving badly
Right.
towards the Jewish people. So I think we have a responsibility, an extra responsibility, to be good neighbors. And then we think about the ratio of Jews to Christians in our society. I think it also behooves us to think of Jews as, in a sense, sojourners among us, who should be treated with respect and honor.
Respect and honor. Yeah, absolutely. I like that. You get a different perspective as an Anglican. That's good stuff.
Oh, interesting.
It's really good.
What does that mean?
I mean, I think so often we just kind of have vanilla Protestants or evangelicals that we're talking with. So I like that we have some different perspectives, which is why we asked you to come on. Okay. Tying into that then, I think that maybe you've noticed this. I think from conversations you've noticed this. You were educated somewhat on it through our Shared Roots class. And it's the reason that stories of anti-Semitism exists, or at least one, is because there's not a lot of action coming out of the church, and especially coming from Christian leaders. Even still, I think we were seeing increased anti-Semitism even before October 7th. And then now it's taken off like a rocket, right, over the last 2 years. And still, it's kind of like Christians are sort of coming around to this and recognizing, maybe we're living in a time sort of like the 1930s in Germany. But still, I think a lot of Christians are kind of scratching their head, even pastors saying, what should we do about this? And so I'd love to hear your take on that. What do you see needs to change as far as Christian responsiveness to what's going on all around us?
Okay.
And specifically in terms of anti-Semitism.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the big questions is, like if someone says, I just want to stick to the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
So I think some in the church are very, very wary of getting into things that are perceived to be political.
Right.
And they're concerned that the political will take over.
Mm-hmm.
They're concerned that if I'm too political, I'll drive people away. And not only will I drive people away who are my current members, that people who are curious, who are seeking, that they come in and they want church to be a time of encountering Jesus, a time of feeling great.
Mm-hmm.
renewed, energized, healed
Yeah.
from a a world that can beat you up pretty hard in the
Yeah.
course of a week.
Yep.
And they don't want to come to church to hear about what's on the news.
Right. Hear more bad news.
Hear more
right?
bad news.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so, they want to break from that. They want a sanctuary
Mm-hmm.
from that. And I think a lot of why people won't touch it is there's just some fear, worry, concern about. I want people to have an experience on church on Sunday that's a sanctuary
Yeah.
from the bad stuff in the world,
Yeah.
not a call to engage it.
Right.
And then I think our focus can also sort of be like, I always have to be in the business of doing things that it's going to lead people to Jesus. And I want to be in the business of leading people to Jesus, but there are things that go on in the world that as a Christian, I believe we have a responsibility for and we should
Right.
care about.
You and I have talked about Micah 6:8 and the call to do justly, right? And
Yeah.
I love that you've brought that up recently in an event that we did. I'm guessing that was maybe the direction you're going, but maybe
Yeah.
not. But talk a little bit about that.
So it's the question of, what is our responsibility in the world in which we live?
Yeah.
And I believe as a Christian, we have a responsibility for the well-being of our society, not just to save souls so they can go to heaven when they die, but to bring people into the kingdom of God, to send them out in the world, and to be salt and light in this world.
Right.
And fortunately, in our society, in America, we're allowed to practice a Christian faith in public, and to different degrees, right? It's somewhat contested. Some people would say if you practice your Christian faith in public, that makes you a Christian nationalist or something. Another subject, I'm sure, but like practicing my faith in public does not mean I want to use the entire force and power of the United States government to compel other people to be Christians.
Yeah.
But it does mean I have a certain moral framework, and that moral framework I'm called to bring into the rest of life. And this has to do, whether we're talking about the sanctity of life or the sanctity of marriage, and when we see Jewish neighbors, their houses of worship attacked, this should bother us. And we need to know what's going on, and we need to stand with our neighbors.
Yeah.
Does that answer the question?
It very much does answer my question. And then it makes me want to ask a follow-up question that I didn't put in our show notes. So here we go. We're going to go a little off script. What can we do about that? Because I think what you just presented is this problem that we have within the church, or for your average Christian who's going, I got enough to deal with in life that's difficult. And now you want me to be an advocate for Jewish people, or now you want me to fight anti-Semitism, or now you want me to have some kind of ministry to Jewish people. How then do we bring this to Christians and to Christian leaders as this is something that's part of maybe our biblical responsibility? I 100% believe it is.
Yep.
But how do we bring this new idea and this new kind of activity about?
Okay. The first thing I would say is I don't think every single congregation can do everything.
Right.
And I think it's fine for a congregation to say, the Lord's called us to do this,
ABC,
and the Lord has
right,
called us to do that.
Yeah.
I don't want to stand in your way, brother. God bless you. We're going to champion this.
Yeah.
You champion that, and I think that's fine. I would also say there's, in football season is over, but so much of a football game is about field position. It's not just about, hey, if I can't score right now, I won't do this. like so much of what the game is about is field position, which is to say, if you're not talking about it at all, if you're not talking about things in the public square, if you're not talking about things with your youth groups and with your kids, there's going to be a power vacuum, and
Right.
something else is going to step into that power vacuum. And when we realize that there's only, was it 15 million Jews on the planet?
Worldwide, right.
They have an outside voice. They have a larger voice than the number of people that they are. But they're a minority. And there is a lot of, when we think about the way social media works, it works by the more something is talked about, the more it's talked about. And the more a perspective is shared, the more it's shared. It's the nature of the thing.
Yeah.
So if you just
The
want
algorithm.
to talk about it, well, that's you've created a power vacuum. And someone else is going to come in with a vision or a version of the story about what's going on with the Jewish people that just isn't true.
Yeah, right.
So I think at a most basic level, we have to talk.
Right.
We have to speak.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be the theme of every single sermon. It doesn't need to be, every single, time I'm on social media. But
not being silent. I think that's what I hear you saying.
Yes.
Let's just at least say something rather than nothing. I feel like in some ways that phrase sounds a little overly simplistic, but maybe let's just start somewhere is what I hear you saying. And you're doing that. And people from your church have come to our Shared Roots class, and so I'm sure some of them are doing, just even by showing up to our Shared Roots class, they're doing that. So we have action, right? We have a voice. We have some discussion going on. That's good. That's helpful. I think maybe that's helpful in answering that question. Why does it seem like the church is kind of silent or inactive on the issue? But okay, let me throw one more thought out to you, and then we'll move on, because I know this is a little off script. But we had a lady a couple years ago. Her name's Noah Tishby. She's Jewish. She was speaking at a Jewish conference, and she said, look, to our non-Jewish friends, she was specifically speaking to Christians because of some things going on social media. And she said, we don't need you to hide us in your attic. We need you to come out and stand with us now, right? And kind of the implication is before it's too late, right? And so she's kind of pointing to the dire situation that we're already in, and that was 2 years ago, and I think it's even more dire now. What do you say to that? How do we give the church a sense of urgency about this issue? Because you're right. If it were normative, then maybe Christians come into church on a Sunday morning and go, yeah, I want to come in, receive, and then leave. But what if we're living in a more urgent time than that? How do we urge people to take this as more urgent and more necessary for action?
Okay. Well, the first thing I would say is that as a pastor and as a community, if social issues, if things going on in society are never talked about in your community because they're perceived to be divisive, that what's actually going to happen is your community may believe a bunch of stuff about Jesus, but at the same time believe a lot of things that are in fact just parroting what's in the world, because you've never worked to bring them you've never tried to bring them together.
Right.
So I'm going to teach about the fruit of the Spirit, but everything that everybody in my congregation knows about Israel and Palestine has come from the news.
Right.
Or their social media feed.
Yeah.
So they've so it's like in a way they're living a bifurcated life.
Yeah.
So they've been given a Christianity that isn't really a Christian worldview. They've been given a Christianity that has to do with their private life and not their whole life.
Yeah.
So the first thing I would say is, as to pastors, but also to the average person in the pew. If you think, I don't want to hear about that stuff in church, I would say to average person in the pew, your vision of what the gospel is about and what God is about is simply too small.
Yeah, that's good.
So first, just expand.
Yep.
Every single sermon should not be about the headlines of the week.
Right.
But if they're never about whatever it is that's going on in the world, if you could go to your church after October 7th, 2023, and not know that something horrible just happened, I would suggest that it's like 9/11 happened, but we're in church, so we're not going to talk about it.
Right.
Like,
that would be silly.
That would be silly.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's interesting you're bringing that up, because I think that's always something we seek to do, or at least I seek to do, is if we get a chance to talk in church, I want to bring the Bible together with this current issue, right? So that we have a biblical lens through which to discern it and respond to it. And of course, we all know there's a lot of content in the Bible about Israel and God's love and God's plan for Israel and the Jewish people. And so I guess that kind of brings me into maybe this sort of modern issue that we're dealing with, where, we've got on the news a conversation about whether or not Christians can be Zionists, or what is Christian Zionism. And of course, we've got a really loud opponent of the church right now. He thinks he's a proponent, but he's an opponent of the church right now, who's saying Christian Zionism is a heresy. I think maybe he's actually recanted the heresy part. But nonetheless, Zionism is bad. And so if you could, as a pastor, someone that we trust to divide the word of God, talk a little bit, maybe what does it mean to be a biblical Zionist or a Christian Zionist? How do we understand Zionism from the scriptures? Or maybe we can't, and you could tell me that too.
So I think it's a super, super interesting question. And I learned a lot through our Shared Roots course about the roots of Zionism, Christian and Jewish. Super fascinating to learn that in some ways, Zionism was born in Christian circles before Jewish.
Right.
That was wild.
Yeah.
And it had to do with beliefs about, in a certain system about interpreting the Bible and biblical prophecy that's often called dispensationalism. And we need to see the return of the Jews to their historic homeland in order for a number of things to happen.
Yeah.
I just think, some of my teachers just flat out say, no, Christian Zionism doesn't make any sense, in the same way that promise after promise after promise is fulfilled in Jesus. To say that there's still this ongoing promise for the Jewish people to the land just doesn't make sense. I would say here you got these promises about the Jewish people returning to the land, and 1900 years went by and it happened. So one of the best tests of a prophecy being true is that it happens.
Right.
Like, how do you know if it's a real prophet? Well, what they say happens.
Comes true.
And here we have this absolutely improbable, crazy thing of Jews returning to their historic homeland after they were booted out in 135 AD by Hadrian.
Yeah.
That's a long time. 135 AD, booted out. And
their culture preserved and their language preserved, right? And even still clinging to the hopes of the promises of the Old Testament. So yeah, absolutely.
So in one way, I would even say to some of my teachers who I respect, who have taught me to see that, no, we shouldn't be looking for a third temple, because Jesus said,
this is another episode.
This is another episode. Okay. Okay, I'm with you, my friend. But sort of like Mark Twain said about infant baptism. Mr. Twain, do you believe in infant baptism? He says, believe in it. I've seen it. Do you believe these prophecies have anything to do with the Jewish people returning to their land? Like, believe in it. I've seen
You've
it.
seen it.
Right. So it's happened.
Yeah.
So I would say that. I would also say, as when people know the story about what was going on in that region of the Turkish Empire
Right.
in the early 1800s and into the late 1800s, into the early 1900s, and how it was an absolutely impoverished land where people were moving away.
Mm-hmm.
And you learn the story about how the Jews start returning there
Right.
and how the land begins to
Flourish.
prosper
Yeah.
and flourish,
Right.
and how even Arab peoples move into the land
Mm-hmm.
because it's thriving
Yeah.
and it's doing better. And you learn the story about people seeking to live together in peace, but then war after war after war waged against the Jewish people who have agreed to terms,
Right.
but their neighbors refuse to agree to the terms.
Yeah.
So this raises the question of, is their claim to be able to have a nation just? Is it true? And I believe it's true.
Yeah.
I believe their claim is just.
And so just to clarify that point, are you saying the claim is just because of the Bible, or are you saying the claim is just even because of just history and the fact that they've got a tie to that land historically, and it's backed up by archaeology? I mean, which way would you go, or would you go
so
both
I would
ways?
say there's a biblical promise
Mm-hmm.
that they have a right to that land. But I would also say, and I know this is where you and I are going to have long conversations, I think it becomes, it's not just a remit to own from the river to the sea,
Mm-hmm.
like from the Euphrates to the sea, that there are people who live there, and they have just claims. I don't think that, I wouldn't advise the Israelis to go into Jordan and Syria and,
Right.
take everything to the Euphrates.
And luckily, I don't think that's their plan, at least not most. So,
Right.
yeah.
So there are people who live there who have rights. I'm not among the Christian Zionists who say God gave them the land, everybody else should just get out.
Right.
I don't think that is right.
Yeah.
And I don't think most Jews and most Israelis don't say stuff like that.
No, they really don't.
And it's weird to me when I bump into Christians who think that Christian Zionism means that.
Yeah, getting rid of a bunch of people.
So I think there's a biblical, God gave them this promise, and it's a covenantal promise. It doesn't mean they get to do whatever they want.
Right.
There's boundaries on it.
Yep.
And then I also think there is a historical and factual claim to the land. And anyone who says, well, they came in from the outside and took it, well, every country on the planet,
Right.
in some way or another, has a story about people fighting and arguing and even going to war over land.
Yeah.
To say you don't have a right to be there, well, come on.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're talking about Zionism now as kind of that self-determination movement, right? That,
yes,
at this point, Israel's been a nation for 78 years. And so wanting it to go away is not feasible, because that means what do you claim that you want to do with all of these Israelis or all these Jewish people? So they're there. We want them to stay there. And as a Christian, you're talking about the justice of that, both for Israelis, but then as a Christian leader, you're also talking about care for Palestinians. And I think that's important. Again, we're totally off show notes, but I think this is great conversation. So it seems like in Christian circles, what we get sometimes is you got the Christians who say, we stand with Israel, and so it's almost like because we stand with Israel, therefore we're against Palestinians or Arabs or Muslims, or we're for the Palestinians, and therefore we're against Israel. So what's the Christian perspective on that? How do we marry these ideas together, or do we?
the Christian perspective. So how about maybe A? It's kind of interesting. So I've had Palestinian Anglican friends.
Okay.
The Anglican Church within Israel there's Christ Church in Jerusalem itself, which is a mixed congregation, by the way, of Arabs and Jews who follow Jesus, and just plain old Gentiles, I guess. There's another Anglican church which is mostly it's called St. George's. It's a Arab congregation. What tends to happen is in the battles. So the first thing is, from my perspective, in the big picture, Israel has sought to live at peace with its neighbors. In the biggest, zoom way out, sought to live at peace with its neighbors.
Right.
And we've had multiple wars of aggression from Muslim Arab neighbors who have just simply refused to live in peace.
Yep.
I don't believe that kids who are raised in Gaza, I believe their minds are poisoned by the propaganda of Hamas, that they don't want peace.
Yep.
So I'll say that. In the middle of this, you have these Arab Christians, and the Arab Christians, they're a lot of ways stuck in the middle, because the Muslims don't fully trust them. They often call them crusaders.
Wow.
Because a lot of, that's what they call them. They see them as sort of traitors to pan-Arab culture. So they get kind of stuck in the middle. They won't criticize. They won't criticize the Palestinian Authority. They won't criticize Hamas. They'll criticize Israel. Well, why? I think in some ways because you can, without being hurt.
Sure.
You criticize Israel, it's like, well, they criticize themselves. It's called the Knesset, right? It's part of a free, open, democratic society.
Exactly.
But if you live in Gaza and you criticize Hamas, they'll kill you.
Right.
So they're stuck in the middle, and their population is shrinking. They're leaving. There is such a thing as there are some radical Jewish groups in Israel who do stuff they shouldn't do. But by and large, these, we call them indigenous Christian populations, they're under intense pressure, and as long as the majority of Arabs don't want to live at peace with the state of Israel, the Christian populations, historic churches, are going to be stuck in the middle.
Yeah.
And it's just terrible. So, what is the answer? I don't know what the answer.
Yeah.
Peace is the answer.
Peace is the answer. I think as Christians, even when it comes to that sort of polarizing aspect of wanting to take a stand one way or the other with Israel or Palestinians, it's, for Christians, it's not really an either or. It's always going to be a both and in terms of our love for, our desire to see the best for both groups. I know that the whole idea of a two-state solution seems very pie in the sky and like a pipe dream, but obviously to have a state or states where both peoples are living together in peace would be the ideal. I think that most people, truly loving people actually want. And I think as Christians, we obviously want that too. I don't know that we have any kind of Bible verse that tells us, oh, that's got to be one state or two states. I'm not even sure on this side of eternity or the Messianic age that we get to decide that. Yeah, I think it probably will always it will always be an item of contention up until the Messianic age, right? That's maybe one of those things that us and Jews agree upon.
Well, I think in the midst of that conversation, I think that most Jews in Israel have a belief that there could a two-state solution was possible. I think at this point, from what I hear and read, there's a lot of that hope is gone because they've been confronted again and again and again with their neighbors saying, "Oh yeah, we want a two-state solution." No, we don't.
Right. It was the
This
Arabs
is all ours.
who walked away from the table 5
Yeah.
times when negotiations had. So I think we can look at history and at current events and recognize that without a massive, massive change, a two-state solution is not in the near future. So, and that's more politics than it is theology and Christianity, but important for Christians to talk about.
Yep. And it does get into ideas of justice and living out what it means to love your neighbor in a fallen world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good. Well, okay. We got off on some tangents there. This is a really good conversation. Let's go back to something, though, because the Anglican denomination actually has a long-standing love for Israel. And so I'm wondering if you could just talk, even if it's just short, just share a little bit about that. What was in Anglicanism? What's in Anglicans that makes them care about Israel as a kind of a denomination?
So I would say that coming out of like big picture history stuff, coming out of the Middle Ages, where there's an essential understanding of Western Europe that it's Christendom, all right, it's just Christendom. But this thing happens when we get into the late 1700s. So the Anglican idea was, this is Great Britain, it's a Christian nation, and if you don't want it to be, I mean, there was a time when England expelled the Jewish population, but just like this is a Christian nation.
Yeah.
Well, with the evangelical revival in the late 1700s, when we have people like the Wesleys, and when we get into the early 1800s, and we start dealing with Wilberforce and that movement, there's an understanding that, yes, we have a Christian framework in our country, but people need a personal relationship with Jesus. So here's this great evangelical movement of saying, yeah, these structures are good, but if people don't engage with who's behind the structures, with Jesus himself,
right,
and if they don't know him as their Savior, it doesn't amount to anything.
Yeah, what good are they?
Right? So out of this is motivated things to change society. We shouldn't just accept society for the way it is. So out of that comes the abolition movement. So this is what abolition comes from. At the same time, they say, the British Empire has gone all over the world, and look, what do you know? The whole planet isn't Christian. Out of this comes the global missions movement. And in the midst of that global missions movement is this awareness that that we in the Anglican tradition have not done well by our Jewish neighbors.
Wow.
And
this
so
is
out of this,
1700s, you said.
This is the late 1700s, early 1800s.
Okay.
So out of that same Clapham sect that was the abolitionist movement, the movement to abolish slavery, this was also out of that same movement came the Society for the Spread of the Gospel. It was a global missions movement. It was a biblical literacy movement. And all in this is, my goodness, here we are, the British Empire. We're in the Holy Land, and we have no presence here. And here are these people who we recognize we've been a poor witness to.
Wow.
Let's see if we can turn that around.
Yeah.
And so they plant Christ Church in Jerusalem, which is the longest existing Protestant church in Israel. Obviously, there's Orthodox and Catholic churches that have been there, forever.
Yeah.
Not forever, but
since Jesus almost.
So
yeah.
So that's the story about how the Church's Ministry to the Jews, or CMJ,
Mm-hmm.
was born in the Anglican context, and it's still going to this day. And it's really, and they came in, of course, with medical missions, with schools, and with an approach to being a good neighbor that really hadn't been taken before.
Right.
Let's just be a good neighbor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it sounds to me like probably the Anglicans, by recognizing the longstanding history of anti-Semitism, they were probably one of the first ones to recognize that and to try to counteract it, or to try
Yeah.
to step away from that history. So I didn't realize that about
Yeah.
the Anglican
It's a neat
tradition.
thing.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
really is. And then, of course, you've got, and you and I don't know enough about it, or we would talk about it, but William Heckler, who was Anglican, who was actually good friends with Theodore Herzl, and kind of got behind Herzl and really pushed him in his desire to bring Zionism forth as a modern movement. So very cool stuff with the Anglican tradition. Okay, let's keep moving here. I feel like we've covered a lot of ground, but let's talk a little bit about just modern response, right? Like how do we engage the church and get the church engaged in countering anti-Semitism, right? Because we've kind of already talked about the fact that it's difficult, but what can we do? What do you want to see done in your church? What do you want to see your church and the congregants within? How do you want to see them take action?
Well, the first thing I want them to do is just to be aware.
Mm-hmm.
I also, so my congregation is a congregation that is soundly on the political right. I would say I have a lot of people who have enjoyed listening to Tucker Carlson over the years, and they care about our country. They care about the integrity of our country, and it's kind of weird to see this thing happening in conservative Christians. For a long time
Right.
have been big backers of Israel and of Jews.
Jewish people, right? Yeah.
So what on earth is going on? And the best explanation I've heard of it is all the language about caring for others
Mm-hmm.
in our society, caring for people who aren't Christians, has been co-opted by the left. And we need to stand up for the integrity of our traditions, our culture, and for us to stand for our culture, well, we just can't be bothered. Okay, maybe we'll stand with Jews who are Americans, but we can't be bothered with something that's going on over there.
Yeah. Okay.
That I think that's the heart of what's driving Tucker Carlson. It's a sense of, if I'm going to be loyal to America, Israel is a distraction.
Yeah.
And I believe that, we've already talked about caring for our neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about the Christian debt we owe.
Mm-hmm.
To understand our faith, we have to understand where it comes from.
Mm-hmm.
I also think civilizationally, the biggest threats to our civilization are there's the threat from within and there's the threat from without. The threat from without is kind of easy. It's Islamic imperialism, some concepts of Islam. So there's that. That's from without. From within, it's the catchword is wokeism.
Right.
And wokeism sees Western civilization as the basic problem of the world.
Yeah.
And Western civilization is Christendom, but underneath Christendom is Judaism.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe Judeo-Christian values.
Judeo-Christian values.
Sometimes the way it's said.
So the way I see it is an attack on Israel, an attack on our Jewish neighbors, is an attack on us.
Yeah.
So to stand with our Jewish friends and neighbors locally and globally is to say, this civilization has problems. They need to be corrected. But it is a civilization that is born of Judeo-Christian roots.
Right.
And in the big, big picture, it's something we can feel good about, we should feel good about, we should care about, and we should be willing to stand up for.
Yeah. And so in that way, we're kind of, as Christians and Jews, coming together to fight for those Judeo-Christian values, or the values that we hold dear in our society, which I think is great.
Yep.
So when it comes to anti-Semitism, I think you're also talking about the ideas that undergird
Yes.
anti-Semitism. By standing against the bad ideas, we're actually fighting anti-Semitism too, because it's those
Right.
bad ideas that give way to it.
That's right.
Yeah.
So like on a university campus, what's driving what's driving something that happens at Columbia University, so that there's a section of the campus that Jewish kids can't walk through.
Right.
Or at Yale University, where Jewish kids can't walk through.
Yep.
It's really a marriage of anti-Western culture, ideology, and Muslim
Mhm.
ideology. And
Yep.
they have this bizarre wedding.
Mhm.
I mean, it's a bizarre wedding.
Right.
Like we just think about all the, just think about all the.
They make strange bedfellows, as
Yes,
as
we'll just
one
leave it
friend of
there.
ours says.
They make strange
Yes.
bedfellows.
Yeah. Right.
But that's what's going on, and we need to understand that,
Mhm.
and we need to be able to stand against it.
Right.
So that's a lot of what motivates me.
Good. I mean, so I'm hearing you say we got to stand against it. We got to stand against the bad ideas, but then also, as you said earlier, just not being silent. Let's not be
Yeah.
removed from the conversation that's happening in our culture because it sounds too political, or maybe even too complex. Let's actually begin to have that conversation. And I love what you alluded to earlier, at least, was that pastors kind of have to take the lead on that. If you don't take the lead on the conversation, it's not going to be happening in your church.
Right.
So you've got to do that job of marrying together what our Bibles have to say with what's going on in our culture to give us some clear understanding. So those are some good kind of tactile ways to get the church engaged in what's going on here. I like it. Any final words before I ask you an important question from one of our Jewish friends? Or shall
No,
we
I
just
don't
go
think
right to
so.
the
Let's hear the
question?
question.
Okay. So this is one of our friends, Jewish friends. This is a new thing we're doing on our podcast, where we want to be able to ask a pastor or a rabbi something that the other side really would like to know. So this is from actually one of our Israeli friends. He says, how does Anglican theology view God's covenant with the Jewish people? Is it still active, or did Christianity replace it? And how does that theological position influence how you see modern day Israel and the Jewish people?
That's a nice small question.
Yeah, not fraught with controversy at all, is it?
Well, Anglican theology.
Or maybe even if
Right.
you want to just zoom out to broader Christian theology.
So I would say that in our doctrinal statements,
Mm-hmm.
we don't have an official statement
Okay,
about that.
got it.
I could also tell you that this is a subject that, since I came back from Israel in 1986, I have thought about, pondered, agonized over, tried to understand. And there are things that I just continue to find elusive.
Yeah. Well, okay, hold on. You're bringing up the fact that this conversation it happens in Christian circles, and it's not like there's a huge consensus on the right answer or the biblical or the Christian answer. There's camps,
There's camps.
different perspectives here.
Yes.
So that's probably important to start out with.
Yes. So, I mean, I would say the first thing is, as a Christian, I don't believe that Jesus is our way. I believe that he is Israel's God who has come in person
Mm-hmm.
He is the Messiah.
Yeah.
He is the Son of God,
Right.
who gave his life for atonement, for forgiveness, and was raised on the third day.
Mm-hmm.
So my starting point is that he is the Almighty's presence who tabernacled among us.
Okay.
In the words of John 1:1, the Word became flesh and Shekinah tabernacled among us. So to try to just say, well, you got your way and we got our way. I know that sometimes people try to say that sort of thing to try to bring the temperature down, to try to not be offensive.
And in our Christian world, we call that dual covenant theology. The idea that Christians come to God one way and Jews in their own way, right?
Right.
But that's not widely upheld or believed in the Christian community.
It's pretty.
That's fair to say.
It's kind of problematic.
It really
Yes.
is. It really is.
On the night before he died for us, our Lord Jesus Christ, after supper, took the cup, and when he had given thanks, he said, "This is the blood of the new covenant, which is shed for you and for many for the forgiveness of sins.
Yeah.
Do this as oft as you drink it in remembrance of me."
Right.
A new covenant.
Yeah.
So to simply say, well, we got a new one, and it's fine for you guys to operate under the old operating system is fine.
Right.
It doesn't really wash with the New Testament.
Yeah.
At the same time, I could be, to pray. I could pray the 23rd Psalm with any Jewish person, and like, oh, well, you're not doing it right. I mean, like, I was even thinking about Paul. St. Paul goes on this great tour, multiple missionary tours of the Roman Empire. The first place he goes to is he goes to synagogues,
right,
and he engages there.
Right. And this is all documented in the Book of Acts.
This is all in the Book of Acts.
Yeah.
And so he doesn't say, well, hey, now that I've discovered, I've learned, I've had this incredible encounter with Jesus on the Damascus Road, and now I know that he the one I've been persecuting is actually the Son of God. He doesn't say, well, forget the Jews.
Right.
They're done.
Yeah.
They stink.
Yeah.
He says, oh, I got to go and talk to them.
Yeah.
And he does it from a posture of, he goes to the synagogue. And you imagine he's sitting in the synagogue and, oh, they're praying. I'm not going to pray right now.
Sure. Right.
Right. He goes. Yes, he does engage in a debate. He has a conversation. And it doesn't always go well for him.
Yeah. But totally. But I'm also kind of, and maybe I'm just getting ahead of you, so I'm sorry if I am. He's not disaffirming them.
Correct.
Right?
That's right.
He would seem to be still affirming them and what the scriptures and what history has already shown and said, which is brothers, right? As one Jew to another. Brothers, I believe that I've come to understand who the Messiah is, and therefore God's affirmation of him and you means I should probably tell you.
Yes.
Would that be a fair way to say it?
Yes.
Okay.
So when I'm in a Jewish context, my assumption is twofold. One is that the first 2/3 of the book that I use is your book.
Yeah.
And you believe in it and you trust in it. You have some traditions that have developed afterwards,
right?
That we don't share.
We're getting back to that tree.
They divide,
right?
But my basic posture to you is this: we share this entire world.
Yeah.
We disagree on Jesus.
Yeah.
I would love. I welcome a conversation about that. But if I'm in a synagogue and they pray for the Messiah to come, I'm not going to throw a hissy fit and say, "Well, he already came, you people."
Right.
It's like it. This is a moment of, well, this is where we disagree.
Totally.
So I hope that And I'm also aware, as I've thought about this, one of the interesting things to me is we've had these conversations. I've been raised, Jews know how terrible Christians have treated Jews.
Mhm.
They've many of them been personally on the receiving end of it, so they know that story. A lot of Christians don't know. A lot of contemporary Christians even don't know how bad it was.
Right.
A lot of contemporary Christians don't know how far back it goes.
Right. Like kind of to the beginning.
Kind of
Pretty close.
2nd century.
Yeah.
Definitely 2nd century. So early, 100, 105. Among theologians who I read. Okay. But one of the fascinating things was to have conversations with new Jewish friends and to say, well, Paul went to a synagogue in a certain town and
Mhm.
they beat him and they threw him over a cliff. Like, what? Like, yeah.
Yeah.
They stoned him. They beat him with rods. That there was basically between the death and resurrection of Jesus and the destruction of the temple, the church was tiny. It had no power. And Jewish communities around the Roman Empire still had, they were larger and they held more power, and there was Jewish violence towards Jews who believed Jesus was the Messiah.
Right.
And unfortunately, some of that relationship, that contested relationship, fueled what came later.
Sure.
And when Christians came into power, true power, with the conversion of Constantine in 325, now they took like this fight between brothers. It's like, but the younger brother was now the older brother.
Yeah.
The younger brother now had power, and he used that power against his older brother.
Yeah. And amplified that violence and that hatred and that vitriol times 1,000 or whatever. I don't know if it can really be measured. I think coming back to the question, though, about how do we view Israel and the Jewish people in modern times because of our theology, I feel like I hear you saying we still have honor, we still have respect, high regard, and we don't delegitimize your identity either as a nation or as a people, and have respect for your religious beliefs, even though we differ on some real key issues.
Yes.
So, but at the baseline of that is that honor and that respect and that high regard for them.
Yes.
Would that be a good way to sum it up?
Yes.
Okay.
And I think, like I'm aware that in the Christian tradition, there was a time when Christians called Jews Christ killers and singled out the Jews as if they were like uniquely bad.
Mhm.
And this is just terrible.
Right.
It's just terrible. And the point of what happens in all of that around Jesus's death is there's nobody innocent in that.
Yep.
There's nobody innocent.
So the Jewish people don't bear the brunt of it all, and everyone else kind of walks away scot-free saying, well, look at us, we have Jesus and our lives are perfect, and the Jews get to deal with all the bad stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
All the apostles left him out to dry.
Right.
And the chief of the apostles denied him.
Yeah.
It's like, that's the story.
Yeah.
So like the takeaway isn't supposed to be, oh, look at them, they're uniquely bad.
Right.
The takeaway is supposed to be, there is something within us, within human nature, that rebels.
Yeah. Well, and that should be the end point. Let me go back, and then we can come back forward again. But you talked about the fact that the accusation was that the Jews were uniquely bad because of the accusation of killing Jesus.
Yeah.
But that the other side of that would say we as Christians are uniquely good. But you and I both know that's not the truth. And you just cited examples. And we can look at church history and go, yeah, Christians are not uniquely good in comparison to anyone, especially not the Jewish people. If you kind of look at history, you read the Bible, you go, we seem to have the same problems here, right? So
Yeah.
we're not uniquely good. And I think that's a part of the anti-Semitism is actually some of that anti-Judaism where Christians kind of stick out their chests and go,
Yes.
we got the right answers, you guys don't. So you guys are lower than us. And that's just horrible. I think that's properly termed anti-Judaism. And it's important for Christians to understand that attitude has done a lot of damage to Jewish-Christian relations also. And that's something I think to be sorry for. I think that's something to acknowledge and repent from. So, okay, good. So let's bring that to a landing there.
I haven't like turned that into a straight, here's my thesis statement. And I know it's a little...
Well, what I appreciate about you, what we appreciate about you is you're so thoughtful that you have to say it long because there's so much to think through and so much that needs to be said about it. And so I think that we all appreciate that perspective.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been a great conversation. Let's tie a bow on it right there. We want to say to all of our listeners, thanks for listening to Amplify. We want you to tune in again next time for another episode. And in the meantime, make sure to go to all the places where you listen to podcasts, share this with your friends, spread the word so that we can get more clicks and get bumped up in the algorithm. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.